once again. Thank you for taking your seat. Welcome to the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Private, Decentralized Infrastructure Show with Sterlin and Chair. I'm Chair. I'm here to prop you up. With me, as always, on this program is Sterlin. Hello, Sterlin. How are you?
Man, brother, I am doing really well. Feeling good. I think we have a lot of really interesting things to talk about. I would say some of it is breaking news, so it should be fun.
Let's get right into it, Sterlin. What are we focusing on today?
So I think everyone who comes to our show knows that we, of course, talk about happenings plus philosophy around crypto and the crypto ecosystem, but also the sort of quote unquote network state parallel society ecosystem, which is directly relevant and related. So today, actually, we're going to talk about, at least in part, what's happening at Network School, which, by the way, Network School is the quote unquote parallel society that Balaji Srinivasan founded. He calls it a network state based on the book of the same name, The Network State. I think you can actually get the book still online. By the way, I'm going to try to be a bit diplomatic in this discussion because there are things that I have my own biases and my own kind of conception of what happened, but I think that this issue was already in the works. So basically, Network School is in Malaysia, and recently the Malaysian government has suspended or canceled, I think now it's canceled, their license to do business, right? Their license to have the school.
Their license to exist?
Basically,
The license to existence itself.
Yeah, so basically what's happening now is that they are, and you guys have to forgive me if some of the facts get like the minor or key details or facts get a little warped because some of the information is still materializing. But what it looks like is that Balaji signed an MOU with Kazakhstan, of all places, to set up the next network school. One of the things that we're going to get into, I think we should get into in some depth here, and at least at some point during this discussion, is my opinion and your opinion as well, once you hear the full story, Chair, on how the situation emerged, what were the predicating incidents and problems that caused it, how could it have been handled differently, and we can use this as a cautionary tale, is probably a good way to put it, for other novel parallel societies and crypto states, etc. Maybe lessons of what not to do and things that could be done better. But I think overall that this situation was probably preventable. There are people who disagree with that, and they're right to think that there is a chance that this could have been inevitable no matter what Balaji would have done. And that's where I want to be fair. But I personally think things could have been done to prevent this. Right now, the situation as it stands, Balaji is running defense and is scrambling to make sure the optics look good and basically saying this is, you mentioned it earlier, this is a good thing that this happened. They're going to be stronger for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also, of course, using lines like, well, if Malaysia doesn't want us, somebody else who cares about technology, et cetera, will, those kinds of talking points. But basically, this is I don't want to downplay this. What's happened there will 100% impact this whole ecosystem of people involved in parallel societies, because everyone kind of sees, even though it's not true, we've talked about this in past episodes, but everyone kind of sees Balaji as the prototypical or the prototype sort of parallel society. even though what he's doing is, say, completely different and even antithetical to what Logos is doing or something like Valley of the Commons is doing, right?
Right. Because Balaji wrote the book on network states, he's sort of, whether or not he came up with the term itself or the wider concept or not, once you publish the book, there goes the credit until someone publishes another more interesting book. Farewell to Westphalia, anyone? Google it. Then go to logos.co/book. This is something that is worth tracking for many reasons. And is this also happening in Honduras? Did something happen with Prospera or Vitalia City that I saw recently, even this week, where they are also in contention with their local government that has granted them?
I don't know if there's any new news on Prospera has been at odds and has had some tension with the government. Their story's a little bit different though. What happened is, so they had ironed out a very dense and complicated series of legal agreements with the Honduran government, and then they had a regime change, right, in Honduras, and the new government basically wanted to kick them out of kick Prospera out of Honduras. But Prospera had established in they ironed out all the legal agreements. They set up in their special economic zone, which is called a ZA in Honduras, and it basically this has been ongoing. This legal tension has been ongoing for years, but Prospera has managed to maintain itself and to. I think they've also done quite a bit of work on their optics as well, but they have not been kicked out, and the government has had a lot of trouble getting rid of them because Prospera did it right in the way that they ironed out their agreements, and it made it very difficult for the government to oust them. Now, there's another question that we could ask, and we hope to never see this, none of us, but governments can always choose if they want to go in forcefully with guns and oust people or worse, right?
Right.
I don't think because of the relationship that they have with the U.S. and like Americans being in Prospera and different nationalities that would be a feasible option for the Honduran government. But governments using force is a historical fact and a precedent, right? So that's always a thing. But the situation is quite different, right? Because what's happened with Balaji now, this escalated rather rapidly and has already reached its conclusion where he's just basically leaving and is done, is what it looks like so far. Unless there's some part of the picture that I don't have in totality, it looks like it's already done. Like he's packing up. They're packing their bags.
Yeah, and you said something very alarming for reasons that I'll give context to upcoming here. Kazakhstan. What? That's it. I think well documented. One of the most difficult places to live and operate, if putting it extra diplomatically. Chair literally 15 years younger now. Really? Because I cut my hair or what? Because I shaved? I'll take it. Thank you. I'll take it. Good old Nick checking in from Bulgaria. They're packing their bags and going. There's a lot of rhetoric that's flying around that I've seen, and you you attended, I think, the inaugural network school session. I think this was the session that the well documented, or at least documented, issue of a mold takeover or some sort of issue surrounding mold management, the vicious double M. What happened there? I saw it come last week as the chatter on this began. I saw my favorite comment so far. They said something like, I went to network school and all I got was mold poisoning. What happened with the mold?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Basically, I won't run through all the details of this because it's kind of a long story and there's other elements, but it is important. So let's talk about it. First, and I want to make this this is me trying to be diplomatic and also understanding. This is the tropics, right? It's an island, albeit a synthetic island in Malaysia, Forest City is. And so mold is already pretty rampant. It's a humid, moist area. There's mold everywhere, right? Just naturally. But what happened effectively at network school is that people started complaining about feeling lightheaded, nauseous, dizzy. They had a myriad of these symptoms, right? And these issues were escalated to Balaji and his team, right? Here's the thing. I was there, like you said. Some friends of mine that I met, and by the way, you know that I have a side project that I run, an organization called Polis Labs. I actually met my co-founders there, and none of us had that is a relevant comment that I made. We're going to get more into this in a moment. Why we founded Polis, okay? But none of us really had any like issues. We did see that there was mold growing in some of the areas, black mold even potentially. I don't know the type. I never had personal problems. I don't have sensitivities, no issues. And but people were literally coming up to me saying they were dizzy and they couldn't concentrate and all these different symptoms. So this got escalated to Balaji, and apparently it got ignored at first. It was
Oh my
like
god.
it was the problem. It seems like maybe was minimized a little bit by the team. It's like, and understandably, right, in some regards, because it's like there's mold everywhere. We're in fucking Malaysia. There literally the humidity levels are super high. There's going to be mold and all kinds of
How were you not prepared for this?
right. It's like and to Balaji's credit here, he did say he had, he always has these really funny turns of phrases. Like these this is after your own heart, chair, where there's a little alliterations or little phrases that stick to memory. And he basically said, "Ah, man, but I'm forgetting this one." But it's something to the extent of this is not luxury. It's something like frontier, right? Or not fancy, but frontier. That's what it is. Not fancy, frontier. Like you're in the right. You're coming here to this place, and that was a comment that he had made originally to everyone before you showed up. So it's like understand that this isn't like a perfect infrastructure. You're not going to be able to walk out the door and get to Giorgio Armani stores or whatever, right?
This is not delight, this is determination.
Right. But
Yeah, makes sense, makes sense.
by the same token, when people address an issue and they care about this issue, and a lot of people are saying the same thing, you probably want to have some form of reaction to it, not just sweep it under the rug. Which is, I think, what a lot of people, and I'm not, this isn't coming from me at all. This is what I think a lot of people felt, that this was swept under the rug. This, I'm going to skip over some of the details here because basically the story escalates in kind of a gradual fashion and then reaches a peak. At the peak, what effectively happened is during one of the town hall meetings, there was basically a screaming match about the mold situation with Balaji. And after this, there were some people who were forcibly removed, for lack of a better phrase, from the venue. And then he finally addressed it, right? And maybe there was some aspect of the solution that was in progress leading up to this meeting. I can't remember, but I do know that the final solution. I know that's an awful phrase about what happened, right? The final solution. So it was kind of funny. He called in these like mold guys in dramatic fashion. That is like part of his MO, right? Called in these anti-mold, this like anti-mold team. He called them the mold busters, like Ghostbusters. So these guys came in with their heavy duty gear. Everybody had to leave their room for a while. Some people, like I had to switch rooms completely into the other tower. There's 2 towers at network school. And so these guys came in with their machines and their vapors and their sprayers and all their shit, their masks, they biohazard suits, etc., and they cleared out the mold. And and, and then Balaji got a report, and the report was basically saying that there was no mold, or that the mold was not like a toxic kind or something of that nature, and like it's all cleared out what mold did exist.
Which can be the case.
Right? And I think because there are such things as social contagions, right? The symptoms people were experiencing. Sometimes people can get like you it used to be,
Psychosomatic effects.
yeah, they used stuff like this used to be called mass hysteria, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
One of my favorite Def Leppard songs, Hysteria. Hysteria. Anyway.
so anyway,
So
it was
network
kind of
school.
there's
All
a
right,
by the
go
way,
ahead.
one last thing I want to mention. There was a this happened like some months or so, or maybe not that long, but some weeks or so after the full event, where Balaji made this video with one of the guys from the mold team, and he's like fist bumping the guy, and he's standing there super proud of the work, has the paperwork and everything. There was no mold. It's like his idea of like a PR move, but it was really
Certified no mold.
it was a little cringe, to be honest. But
You
anyway,
know,
the thing is that what this okay, with all humor aside, all slapstick comedy aside, what this boils down to, Chair, is that there was no like any kind of governance remediation in place for problem solving or dispute resolution. Period. What everybody was like, it was set up so that you have King Balaji, right? And then you have his little like inner circle team doing the admin grunt work effectively. And so if you had a problem, you had to go to him. And another disclaimer that I want to give here is like maybe some of this was solved in some way after the fact, right? Because I was there during the first cohort, deeply experimental. And this is, credit where credit's due. You're still playing around with the activities. From what I can see from afar and what I've heard, some things got better, some things kind of stayed the same, right? But you have to have agreements in place with your community that you're inviting. You have to have some kind of coordination understanding. You have to be developing some kind of culture around problem solving, like some kind of operationalized procedures. None of that existed. And there were some other like kind of weird things that happened in the process of this. Like it, there was a like some ways that he tried to get people to get more involved in like helping solve problems by getting them to do work on a volunteer basis after they had already paid to come in. Like some shit like that happened. You didn't necessarily have to, but it was, I don't know, it's just not what I would say was an appropriate solution. So I feel like a lot of the solutions or a lot of the answers were a little bit tone deaf.
it's such an
Right.
interesting problem. It's such a multifaceted and interesting problem, and the social dynamics, the experimentation of what's of the mission or objective of the place, the isolation, the subtropical climate that probably most people that were attending were not used to, or at least
Correct.
not acclimated to. So the convergence of many issues into one thing, it's a difficult thing to deal with. As you said, sort of, it's important to have crisis and conflict resolution contingency plans in place. Really, no matter who you are, where you are, what you're participating in, if you're trying to be prepared. And even then, unexpected things will arise.
Yeah, and if we get a little bit more even philosophical with it, I mean, I do think that, and this is where the philosophy comes in, and this is where we can actually get really critical, aside from like the people kind of dramatic stuff, which is just a lot of gossip, honestly. But Balaji's mindset is that of a startup founder, right? You come in, move fast, break things, He articulated this by basically saying the land is editable. He used that term a lot. He applied like computer lingo to the land. The land is editable. We can do anything we want. We can change things. This is a synthetic island, so we're not worried about like encroaching on indigenous territory. These were like commentary that he made, and he very much, of course, has a kind of a technocratic mindset where he's the founder. What he says goes. There's no like decentralization wasn't ever part of the guiding principles of the community. So there would be no problem solving happening in a decentralized way other than what people like tried to work out between themselves without his sort of
Was that a stated and spoken thing, or guys, decentralization was never part of this.
no,
No one
not
ever said you thought that someone said it, but you never actually heard anyone say decentralized.
yeah. So I mentioned Polis Labs earlier, the org that I co-founded. My partners are like they're geopolitical risk experts. They're strategists in geopolitical conflict resolution, those like very serious stuff, right? And especially in warfare zones and zones where there are high stakes, right? The stakes are high. And we had uh, one of the things that we had realized very early on was that there was like very little aside from these governance issues I've mentioned, which we talked about at length while we were there physically in person, there was also like little community integration, right? Because he had even said it himself. Balaji basically didn't seem to give two shits about the local community, and he didn't really have to. And I can kind of see it from his perspective in the sense that everything is like it's a synthetic island. He didn't think there was like ritualistic territory or communal territory that you're encroaching on, but for anybody who's not familiar, Forest City has a really weird history, and it's kind of an unsettling history. Let me explain a bit of the
Spooky.
background. I'm going to explain a little bit of the background, but I wanted to arrive at this point about governance. So the reason that we formed Polis was because of this, partly because of this community integration issue, and partly because of this governance issue. Like Vitalik also came and gave a talk at network school while I was there, actually it was an influential talk for me, where he said in one of his slides that governance is not solved in these communities and membership is not solved in these communities, literally talking about the problems that we're experiencing in that space
So
right
what is
then.
being solved?
Right. Well, I mean, the whole purpose of the like his purpose or his modus operandi was just to create another nation state and to provide a sandbox. Right. Most of these parallel societies, they crop up because the organizers and the people involved, they want a money making scheme, one, and they also want a regulatory sandbox for technological development. Those are like some of the guiding issues. It's not first and foremost about human governance and human coordination and creating new societies. It's not like Logos's notion of creating a parallel polis and building out an activist network. Instead, it's about like sidestepping regulations. It's about ruling your own community. It's about, for Balaji specifically, it's about creating a new nation state and playing at the big boys table, as we all know and we've talked about. So we were making comments very early on, and my co-founders and I with Polos, we were saying this thing is likely going to go awry. There's very zero coordination efforts. Things are extremely disorganized. There doesn't seem to be a coherent strategy as to move forward. There doesn't seem to, and the thing that alarmed us the most was there was like very little to no local integration, and almost like not even giving a fuck about the Malays at all from any of the team.
It's an island, right? Like, it's an island that is
Yeah,
100% occupied by the network
yeah.
school, or
So
are there
the
other residents there?
so this is a good part for me to get into the story, right? So it's a synthetic island, and what happened is there was a Chinese developer called Country Garden that came in.
Sounds like a buffet.
It does, doesn't it? It does. So they came in from China and they started to develop this land, and it was going to be like a hub and a vacation spot and a resort spot for wealthier, better off Chinese. And so they started building this out. It became a bit of a boondoggle and a quagmire. So what happened is they were building it out, and they had the local Malays and local population. They bid the contracts for developing the land out to them. And get this, where I heard this and where our team heard this was from the engaging with the local population. We actually went into JB. We went into the local city. We went to the bars. We had drinks with the locals. We chatted them up. We got to understand the lay of the land a lot more. This should have been, see, this is my point. This should have been done by Balaji and his team. Like, at least to some extent. And if they did do it, they didn't internalize it in any way or find out relevant information and put it to use. But what happened is we were told that the locals who were contracted to do this work for Country Garden got stiffed. They never had their contracts fulfilled by the Chinese developers, by Country Garden, when they were developing
There's
this.
like a really successful land developer from New York that achieved a very high office that operated in a similar fashion. I just can't remember their name off the top of my head. I'm not surprised to hear that, unfortunately. So that's how they came to find Forest City, or that's how it became available to the network school because of this. So already a bad energy seated at this place before the arrival. By the way, folks, you are watching the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum. What do we call this show? The crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private, decentralized, peer-to-peer infrastructure show with Sterlin and Chair. That is Sterlin. I am Chair, and we're talking what is happening or what happened with the network school in Malaysia and what will happen going forward. So, Sterlin, you just laid out what happened before the network school arrived. Chinese workmen's strife and unfulfillment of contracts to seed the energy of this place, and then what happened?
So here's the thing. Remember that Balaji had actually commented that this is a synthetic island. This is like it's a paraphrase, but this is something he literally said in one of his talks. It's a synthetic island. It's not like indigenous ceremonial ground or anything of that nature. And so he disassociated this territory with Malaysia in some way, in his head at least. Now, what we learned from the locals is that they have a great distrust now of anybody coming in to build anything fucking at all. And you can see why. Because of what happened. They got stiffed by the Chinese developers. So they're like super skeptical of anybody who comes into this island trying to build something, because they feel like they're gonna get taken advantage of at bare minimum, or harmed in some irrevocable way at worst. Imagine being Balaji and having this intelligence and taking like the human dynamic of this intelligence seriously, and then integrating that into your business practices, and then having a very focused goal of interacting with the locals. It's not a surprise, though, in retrospect, when you think about it, that this did not happen, because look at it like this. He had all the opportunities in the world. I mean, he couldn't even. He was struggling handling his own community that he brought in, who support him. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Much less trying to work with the locals. And so this is one of my thesis, and we can chat more about this. My personal thesis is also part of the thesis of some of the research activities that my team over at Polis conducts. If you don't have really sound local community integration in these spaces, you are already entering into a lose-lose scenario, right? Because what's going to happen is, regardless if it's spurred by the locals or not, if the government gets a hankering to want to kick you the fuck out, and you don't have local community support, you're done. You're cooked.
Right.
You're cooked,
Yeah,
right? Because the locals, even though they are not all necessarily the government, there are some who are probably part of the government, who have family members of the government. They have some kind of influence there, to say the least. And they're the
They're the
ones who.
locals.
That's right, man. They're the ones who are tied to the land and tied to the community. It's like, fuck, you just have to work with these folks. And so right away, we saw this as a huge issue. And we had made comments talking about my co-founders with Polis that this is going to go bad, right? Because my co-founders had seen this before. They work in these contexts. And they said, this is not a good thing. Like, there needs to, and there were people, I don't want to toot our own horn, not just us, but there were some other people there too who were talking about these times. We were actively bringing these issues to his awareness and to his team's awareness. But
I recall you specifically making comments around this. It was tied more to the mold story because it was pertinent at the time, but you were saying like there's no local connection or bridges established, and there's no conflict resolution. Those are the two big points that like there was no contingency plans for what if some shit happens that we didn't anticipate, and how that would be dealt with. And so I can back up your claim there for sure.
yeah, so I mean, this is again the point of having this conversation is not strictly to shit on Balaji. I think that we all here and everyone who's watching our show does understand that his goals, the way that they're arranged and set up, are naturally going to, I think, drift this direction, right? Where you kind of have a mindset of not really caring about the people as much as you do the technology. I think that's a key point. When you care about the technology more than the people, you're going to run into a bunch of problems. When you care more about your vision of setting up a nation state than about the actual local community, about the context, and about your own members, you're going to inevitably run into problems. It doesn't matter how many billions of dollars you have. I think I remember seeing the show House of Cards. You know, obviously, fuck Kevin Spacey, but I remember one of the quotes that his character made in the show. Right, we know about Hollywood, right? But one of the quotes that he made in the show, I think his character made, was really good. Yeah, I think he says Raymond, who's like this capitalist billionaire. Yeah, Raymond, you might have all the money, but I have all the men with guns.
Yeah, it's what was it? Yeah, at the end of the day, physical, like the military is still the ultimate. Yeah, physical might is still the ultimate. So I still am having trouble piecing together the order of operations here. The best as I can tell, there was a tax dispute between the Malaysian government and the network school entity itself
Yeah, I
because
didn't
they
talk
were
about.
not paying taxes to Malaysia or anyone, and some taxes were expected, it would seem.
Yeah, so let me explain how this whole thing started to the best of my knowledge. So it actually started with a kind of crazy, almost like unbelievable conspiratorial type situation. So somebody had made a quasi anonymous or maybe even an anonymous post online that kind of took hold and I think reached the Malaysian government and the locals. They were basically saying that the network school was acting as a safe harbor for Israeli nationals with dual passports. So they were saying they were bringing in like Israelis who they associate with terrorism, which I think personally would almost agree with some of the sentiment, at least when it comes to like Zionism, right? But not when it comes to like just normal people. I don't, it doesn't really matter. But I think the whole thing was just more of a smokescreen in order to try to oust them, right? It was just like a reason that government ended up giving itself to like the tax thing that you mentioned, also like the business license issue. It basically it's giving them permission to endlessly harass and investigate network school, right? Because they were investigating first under this idea that it was a safe harbor for Israelis. Whether that was true or not is another matter entirely. I doubt that that full story is even true. But it was kind of funny because Balaji made this video and he had all of the network schoolers, the NSers as they're colloquially called, come out to the front of network school and they're all like holding up their passports. It's like, hold up there. We have this passport photo to prove. It's like, bro, if they have a double passport, that doesn't really prove anything, does it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, not really.
This is this
Juicy,
is
it's
this is
juicy.
sticky stuff. This is sticky stuff on all sides here on the crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, private, decentralized, peer-to-peer infrastructure show. Okay, so the allegation was that, and it was an anonymous or some sort of tip. Like, was it an article, or was this like a report to the government, or the government purported or reported that someone had tipped them off to these activities, or what is the narrative there?
As far as I know, I don't know all the strict details of this. And you can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The As far as I know, it was just a post. I'll have to dig it up and we can find it. But it was an online post that went through this whole like spiel about it. It was just an X tweet.
Okay,
And
so the post sort of
it,
spurred the government to do something.
yes. But where the post originally came from, maybe there's more information on that. I'm not privy to it and don't know all the details. But allegedly, it was a post on X that spurred the Malaysian government to react. And of course, this post blew up. And I can imagine it kind of blowing up because, like, if you've already pissed off the locals or caused some ire in some way, well, yeah, it's gonna something is gonna happen that is not to your benefit, right? I think there was another thought that I had, but I lost it. It's actually really important too. It'll come back to me. But
Uh, Mo on X asks, who is Balaji? Balaji is the founder of the Network School. He's the author of the Network State book, which is the framework for the network state, which super TLDR explanation is uh, uh, a new type of nation state that gets its own carved out of somewhere, uh, that one of their eventual goals is to seek, or like they seek diplomatic recognition at the big boy table of the UN and other such global entities. And it's okay, in my opinion, a very technocratic pursuit. Um, and
yes,
so we're discussing the drama that has surrounded the network school in Malaysia that Balaji set up and was running, and now has been doomed by the Malaysian government and kicked out from Forest City, the island that they occupied.
and
Um,
there's something I want to get into before I forget because I want to be really, really fair about this. So
mhm.
there's people who make comments, and there's a lot of truth to these comments that what happened there was inevitable, right? Regardless of what kind of like risk mitigation that he's done, because, and I agree with part of this sentiment because governments are not going to look too kindly to anybody setting up any kind of parallel society because they're all a various threat to the status quo and to the power dynamics, right? So Balaji wanting to start a new nation state, that's a threat. A community wanting to do activist work and push back against government and governance failures, that's also a potential threat, right? So it is 100% feasible that even if they would have taken the most precautious approaches, right, or the most precaution, that the local government would have still tried to come after them or would have tried to renege on any kind of contracts or deals that it made because this is the nature of governments. And I want to be really fair about this. And this is the anarchist that stirs deep within me that maybe it didn't fucking matter if they did everything perfectly. But I am here to say that a lot of what happened, or maybe not a lot, at least some of what happened probably was preventable with a bit more forward thinking and a bit more strategy and a bit more local integration. That's all the point that we're making here is it's not to say that everything would have been hunky-dory and perfect and government wouldn't have got pissed, but you would have probably stood a bit more of a fighting chance had you actually gone in with more of a local mindset, with more of a community mindset, and with more of an understanding that the people component and the governance and the coordination schemes, the dispute and conflict resolution, that all those things are as important as your vision and as important as bringing in your so-called quote unquote dark talent to build out different types of technologies for you.
Something that Vinay Gupta speaks about a lot that I think applies in this case, though he usually speaks about it in a different context. But you have to be useful to those that you need acceptance from, and he usually references that in the context of crypto and blockchain adoption by large institutions and governments, and acceptance and regulation and all that on-chain. What do they call it? On-chain RWA, real world asset. But I think in this context, like it's the same thing. You have to be useful to the local population, at least amicable, or at least engage with them. You can't sort of ignore. You can't approach it from I guess, as headstrong or as ignorant to the local population as they did. It seems pretty straightforward. Like having a local impact first, and then building out whatever your aspirations might be, seems like maybe a more logical way to go about things. But also, it's like, what was the population of Forest City before the network school arrived? Did they double the population of the area? I don't know. I'm honest. I haven't looked at these numbers at all, but it
Yeah,
seems like if
so
it was a huge influx of people, that would be concerning for some.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are since I went. I know that the first cohort was around 150 people, which was a pretty, a pretty small group of people, honestly, and nothing that made an impact there. It was already a really weird place. There was all these, you've seen photos of it before, right? It's all these high rises that are like mirror images of one another with this vegetative growth on them, where it almost looks like a solar punk ghost town, right? And there was just a few businesses there. The few businesses there are businesses largely ran by Chinese nationals who were, I guess, anticipating that there would be a Chinese contingent of people coming there, so they were serving that kind of cuisine. Overall, there were very few businesses there. There wasn't much of the local population there at all. There were a few folks. It was kind of weird and really ghost-like, to tell you the truth. I didn't always it felt like something out of the Twilight Zone a little bit when I was there.
I had that sense a little bit when I was in Qatar, in Doha. It was a little bit.
Could see that.
It
Yeah.
felt a little unoccupied, given how many gigantic high rises there were and how few
Yeah.
people there were.
Something else I wanted
Yeah.
to come back to while it's on my mind. Remember you mentioned the idea of governance in the network school community, the difference between like centralized and decentralized, and I said that it was more centralized, and you said, well, is that something that was explicitly stated? And the reason I'm coming back to that is because so Polis Labs has actually conducted research in these communities, focus groups, right? Focus group based surveys, participatory and embedded research. And one of the things that they surfaced is that sometimes there's a mismatch between what the startup founders say. And this is actually research from one that wasn't even network school. This is at another pop-up, one that's anonymized, another pop-up that Polis conducted research in. What they found is that there is sometimes this like concealed hierarchy, right? So because a lot of times, because these communities come from blockchain and the Bitcoin world and the crypto world, they try to appease everyone or soothe everyone's concerns by saying this is going to be like like a practice of decentralization or engaging in decentralization. But what we actually found is there's a hidden hierarchy, and it really irks people, the participants in these communities, when it's not explicitly stated what the governance organization and the structure is going to look like, because then the power also gets concealed. So there's this lady, what was her name? Joe Freeman, who wrote an article about this called, what's it called? It's about structurelessness versus structure. I can't remember the title, but basically she says that in movements, when you try to pretend like you don't have a structure, right, and you're just like a free for all, or maybe you like loosely claim you're decentralized, but somehow power pockets and power centers still emerge in those communities to issue orders and dictates. So this is what it has felt like, this structurelessness where these power pockets emerge in these communities. And so this is something that is documented now in the research that happens. And this, in my opinion, is what was happening as well at the network school. So you see this idea is a documented, data-based empirical finding that is potentially being replicated in these other networks. So we have to find an intervention or a solution to prevent that from happening, and to understand that is part of our, like, I would say it's a handicap within the crypto ecosystem, because we're all about decentralization, but we don't apply what we actually care about to these physical communities when we boot them up. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that the people who found it, they have stakeholders they need to appease, they want to make money, right? This creates externalities, and then they also feel like they're going to lose something if they actually do decentralize the governance protocols and the coordination schemes and the dispute resolution and those kind of things. But we're seeing now that this is something you really should do, or at very least, you should be honest and upfront and say, "Hey, we are centralized. We're top down. We have this guy. You follow his rules." And be honest about that. At least if you're honest about it, the people who are okay with that will come and they know what to expect. So this is the issue that we're dealing with.
You know, something that pops out is past experience. Someone in a position where someone is someone or multiple people that have past experience in dealing with similar situations, or at least deeply studying those situations. Not to say that the NS leadership hasn't and didn't, but it would seem to me, like, and it seems like the results of the Polis studies as well were like, without prior experience and entering into these types of ventures without making very careful considerations about the place and the people that you're going to be interacting with, that it spells trouble. Julian Smith from X comments, not throwing shade on faith, but it's true and inexorable that Islam, as core to Malaysia as it is, has social and political hierarchy under it. So double statism, I think it's a salient point,
Yeah.
and can't be ignored, that there is a lot of culture, precedent, authority that is established for long, a very long established culture and history within the faith system as well, let alone the government, and whatever effect the intermingling of the two has to the local to the local hierarchy. So, you know, having like meaningful diplomacy, I mean, that's
Yep.
probably one of the biggest themes that's coming out of this episode of the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show with Sterlin and Chair, is diplomacy, planning, contingency planning, something that is quite important if you're going to venture into real world applications like this,
Yeah, I think that
applications of these frameworks.
I'm gonna respond to this comment about the Islam thing too, which I think is a really, again, a salient point, as you said. But I think one of the weak spots that, and I'm gonna broadly paint, I'm gonna generalize a little bit here, so bear with me. But in the cryptocurrency community and the blockchain and tech community, a lot of folks have this mindset that if you just build it, they'll come, right? If you the Silicon Valley mindset, move fast and break things, everything's going to be good, right? Just apply the lean startup model, put out your product, iterate on your product. It's going to grow no matter what. All of those rules are not applicable to physical human communities. That's it, right? Because if you go in and you apply those rules to the people that you're working with and you treat them like they're parts of some kind of software that you're trying to develop and that they're potentially expendable, right? As a sacrifice to the final product in a utilitarian fashion, you're going to find out very quickly that bad things are going to happen, right? This is why, like, we've really seen a growth or a convergence of social scientists and psychology oriented people from the humanities now converging on these spaces as well to add their expertise. And I think a lot of times there is a very strong degree of hubris in some of these folks who boot up these communities, who think they can just come in and do whatever the fuck that they want to, without having the necessary and the requisite expertise needed to fully develop out your community, right? You can't just have the tech side and think that's all that's necessary. There's a whole domain of expertise and understanding that you have to have before you come in and try to set up shop here. And this is just something that is not considered. And I think part of this, and this is not, and this is me trying to lighten the blow a little bit, but a lot of folks, I just think they're too early. They're a bit early, and they haven't really processed or internalized that truth, right? But now more and more people finally are starting to do that. And I want to give props to, so Logos for one is doing this right by acknowledging the community, by invoking what a lot of us are referring to as the listening layer, right? Listening to the locals, engineering around community needs, developing a system for working with, and not treating the people involved as a means to an end. So props to Logos. I also really like Edge City's model, right? Where Edge City, so they were already friends. Let me use the Edge Patagonia example. Timur, the founder, was already friends with people in Argentina. And so they already had local connections. They had already scouted out the area and got an intelligence download on what it would look like to come in and how people would feel about it. And then once they got there, they integrated very quickly with the community, invited the community to be part of it. That's how it's fucking done, right? That's how it's done. You don't come in thinking that you are a standalone island, right? And no pun intended, that you're an island and that you can just do whatever the hell that you want to without like community repercussion. And this is not to say that whatever the community does to you is morally okay, right? Depending on how you set up your community. It's just to say that there are realities, like mechanical realities and cultural realities, that we have to face when we go into these communities, and you really got to take that into consideration. The reason why I think Edge specifically does well with these things is because they have a strong contingent of people who are interested in governance. They also have a lot of people who are interested in their regenerative sort of community, like planetary stewardship and those kind of things. And those naturally involve the local community in these different contexts.
There was, we touched on it earlier, that the next stop, Kazakhstan, for the network school specifically, was like, well, Kazakhstan is an island in a sense. It's sort of a very large island, the largest of the stands, I believe, even larger than Afghanistan by a measurable amount. I'm just going off memory. It's quite a difficult place to navigate, to put it again very diplomatically. I recently interviewed, and it will be released next week, Botaj Artemeli, who is a human rights activist and a lawyer, who has decades of experience in defending political dissidents, whistleblowers, activists, especially those who are seeking political asylum in different countries. And ironically, because she was helping a fellow Kazaki whistleblower, she was tapped and subsequently made out to be falsely accused of being an international fugitive. And ultimately, it was because, or the chain started because she was taking her client, the victim's testimony, over a Skype call. And once she was connected to, once it was established that she was representing this victim of the corruption of that country, that she was targeted, and she was made an example of, specifically because she was aiding and assisting. And it points specifically to the fact, like, and I think this is a great example. Like, I'm not sure what the tech stack is or was or is for the network school, but wherever you are operating and however you are operating, you are limited in your actual freedom and censorship resistance by the tools that you are using. And what's funny, and it's funny and sad, it's more sad than funny. Spota says, she's like, at the time, I thought because I was using Skype that we were fine. that because we were using Skype that nobody would have been able to connect, because we weren't using the phone or our cell phones, that we should be okay. And that was years and years ago. And she's still, by the way, living as a refugee in Belgium. She's not back home, and might never be. But the point is that the tools that you're bringing into this type of scenario are just as important as this this the structure of the entity or the system that you're trying to establish in real life. Because if you're just building on top of the same old technology and infrastructure, then you are playing from behind the 8 ball. That is to say, you're playing an obstructed game. This is the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show with Sterlin and Chair. I'm Chair. I'm here to prop you up. That is published author and deep thinker and my friend Sterlin, right there and down there. Depending on which view you are looking at, because we are broadcasting in both portrait and landscape mode. This show comes to you every Tuesday, immediately following the logo circle spaces that happen every Tuesday as well. Sterlin and I both have been contributing to the Logos project for the past few years, and things are getting rather serious with Logos, and the blockchain is in testnet version 2 now. There was a successful V1 testnet that had a nice distributed amount of node runners and brought together for the first time the entire Logo stack under one protocol and runtime, or like one runtime. And now version 2 is live. Anyone can run a blockchain node via Logos Basecamp, the Logos Ecosystem Explorer. So go now to logos.co/Basecamp, download Basecamp, and run a testnet node. Claim some tokens from the testnet faucet. Watch them automatically be staked in the world's first and only private proof of stake consensus protocol. And learn how you can build on top of Logos at logos.co. So all of that to say that I wonder, and maybe you can speak to this, Sterlin, what was the stack, and what was everyone learning at network school? What did you learn in that first cohort from your teachers at the network school?
This is kind of an interesting thing. As far as the stack is concerned, it looked pretty rudimentary, like it was just a back-end platform that used Luma, right? That was the stack. That was the extent of it. Now they have kind of another like network school orientation thing that just looks like a normal server, but I'm not really sure if there was any other deeper tech behind it or not. Now, as far as the network, this was actually one of the biggest critiques, or one of the side critiques of the network school, is that it wasn't much like a school. If it was a school, there was one professor, and his name was Balaji, and he gave his usual lecture or sermon on Tuesdays every week. Don't know if that's changed. He did invite, like I told you, Vitalik came and spoke. There was usually like a guest speaker once per week who would come and give a talk, but these weren't talks that were what I would call professor-like or school-like, and that's probably by design on Balaji's part. They were more like startup pep talks, right, for developing products and building things. Very biased, I think, to the direction that Balaji wanted to take it, which is fine if you want to do that. But this was something that I heard people complain about to me very often when I was there. It's like I didn't mind it personally, but a lot of people said, I wish there was more structure, like I guess they thought it'd be like an actual school, like a college where you would come, right? You would get up in the morning, you'd go to your first class, right? And then maybe you would have another class that day, and then a setup like that.
That's what the name would indicate at the least. But to be fair to Balaji, I believe he was a professor, or at least a lecturer at Stanford or somewhere serious.
Stanford, yeah, he was. But yeah, I think he wanted to set this up so it was more, it's called network school, but it was really set up more like an incubator, kind of, right? Because he brought over these he referred to the individuals as dark talent, basically people who are largely like minorities from certain countries, or people who would go unnoticed or unacknowledged for their talent or the skills, or they would be from third world countries where they wouldn't have easy access to a job market. And this is what he refers to as dark talent. From an outside observer looking in, it could also look like you were trying to bring in like super cheap labor or free labor from other countries to build products for you. So so it depends on your perspective, right? It's either really noble and helpful, or it's really colonialist and harmful what he was doing. I'll leave the judgment up to you guys. I think personally it was mostly fine, because those people got to get out of the whatever environments they were in, especially if they were not good ones. And network school was at least a bit better than that, even though it was quote unquote frontier, not fancy. But the thing that was probably done the best there that I really enjoyed, and I think a lot of other like parallel societies and pop-up villages had done the same. They have this setup where the individual members or participants can set up their own talks. They can set up their own events. They can host them themselves, and you could do this, of course, via Luma, which is a fine coordination tool for this particular purpose, I think. I gave a couple of talks of my own. One of them was pretty heavily attended. It was from the parallel society from the crypto anarchist perspective. I'm surprised that I didn't get shunned for that, but I'm not even sure that he noticed, acknowledged, or cared that I gave that talk anyway. So it didn't really matter. But that's it wasn't the term network school is a bit of a misnomer, right? It's more of a like network incubator is how I would define it or describe it.
I think that's fair, and I think that you're giving a fair sort of summation and opinion of how things went for you over there at the network school in Forest City in Malaysia, which is now officially shut down. I'm seeing posts on the timeline about it as I search in the background, and it is officially so over, at least for Malaysia and the network school. Just like that, we've done an hour. I don't know if it went fast for you. It went fast
Yeah,
for
so
me, and here we are.
it's a topic that I really enjoy discussing. Just not necessarily shitting on biology, although I mean it happened because of what happened. But I really enjoy talking about the failures and how to rectify and to remediate those, because I think the last thing I want to say here. I know we're at the end of the show, but this is something what happened to biology in the network school. What has happened in the past to Prospera, all of these incidents are going to reflect on all of our efforts and going to tinge our endeavors with that kind of bad look. So there's and again, some of this is inevitable. That's true. But there's a lot of things we could be doing a lot better on the people front. And that's the last thing that I want to say. It's really important.
It can't be forgotten. It should be the first thing. It
Right.
should be the first thing when you're dealing with people. Think about the people first. Sounds fair to me. Sterling, thank you. It's been fun as always. Let's do it again next week. Everyone that's watching, thank you for watching. Thanks for using the chat. Subscribe, turn notifications on wherever you are watching. Follow Sterling and I by our handles down there, scrolling so beautifully from left or from right to left at the bottom of your screen. And we will see you once again next week, same time, same place, right here, wherever you're watching, which is multiple platforms. And do check out logos.co, logos.co/basecamp to download and use Basecamp and run a testnet blockchain node. Mainnet soon, but not too soon. This is and has been the Crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum private decentralized infrastructure show. Before we go, some final apologies. My apologies and our apologies to Mold, Kazakhstan, Honduras, and Prospera,
Mold.
Esoteric Land Editing, Forest City Locals, The Nature of Governments. Our apologies to Weird Places, to High Rises. Apologies to focus groups, startup founders, concealed hierarchies, and our apologies to experiencers. That's it. That was the Crypto Bitcoin Private Decentralized Infrastructure Show. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Mo. And thank you to Dr. Shago, who says, just popped in to say you should workshop that title. I agree. I agree. We'll see you next time.